The dust on her boots had turned from brown to gray somewhere between Carson City and here, and Adelaide Owens wondered if that dust might be all she'd leave behind when she finally collapsed on some nameless road. She knocked on another door in Piach, Nevada, her knuckles raw from 100 other doors in a dozen other towns, and waited with the last shreds of hope clinging to her tired heart like cobwebs in an abandoned house. The year was 1875, and the silver boom had brought plenty of men to this rough mountain town, but precious few opportunities for a woman alone. Adelaide had been knocking on doors since dawn, asking for any kind of work, anything at all. She could cook, clean, mend, keep books, tend animals, anything that might earn her a meal and a place to sleep that wasn't the cold ground. But door after door had closed in her face, sometimes with pity, sometimes with suspicion, and once with an offer that made her skin crawl. She moved to the next house, a modest timber structure that looked better kept than most in this ramshackle mining town. The paint was fresh enough, the porch swept clean, and there were actual curtains in the windows instead of old flour sacks. Adelaide smoothed down her worn calico dress, pushed a strand of dark hair back under her bonnet, and knocked. The door opened, and a man stood there who made her breath catch despite her exhaustion. He was tall, with broad shoulders that filled the doorframe, dark hair that needed cutting, and eyes the color of creek water in summer. He wore work clothes that had seen better days but were clean, and he held a dish towel in one hand like she'd interrupted him at some domestic task. Yes. His voice was deep, but not unkind. Adelaide straightened her spine and launched into the speech she'd given so many times that day it had worn grooves in her tongue. "Sir, my name is Adelaide Owens, and I'm looking for honest work. I can cook and clean. I'm good with numbers if you need books kept. I can mend and sew, tend a garden, care for livestock, and I don't eat much. I'm not asking for wages, just board and meals and perhaps a small corner to sleep in. I can start right now today, and I promise you won't regret giving me a chance." The man studied her with those creek water eyes, and Adelaide felt her cheeks warm under his gaze. She must look a fright, dusty and worn and desperate. She waited for him to shake his head like all the others, to close the door with a polite excuse or a rude dismissal. Instead, he said, "You look about ready to drop. Come inside and sit down before you fall down." Adelaide blinked in surprise. "Sir, I'm asking for work, not charity." "I heard you. Come inside anyway." He stepped back, holding the door open wider. She hesitated only a moment before her weary legs made the decision for her. She stepped into a main room that was surprisingly tidy for a bachelor's dwelling. There was a table with 4 chairs, a wood stove that radiated welcome heat, shelves lined with books and windows that let in the afternoon light. It was simple but clean, and it felt more like a home than any place she'd been in months. "Sit," the man said, gesturing to a chair at the table. "I'll get you some water." Adelaide sat gratefully, her legs trembling now that she'd stopped moving. The man brought her a cup of cool water and she drank it slowly, trying not to gulp it down like the desperate creature she'd become. He sat across from her and folded his hands on the table. "My name is Gabriel Davis. I own a small ranch about 2 miles outside town, raise horses mostly. This is my town house. I use it when I need to be in Piach for supplies or business. Now, tell me true, Miss Owens, what brings a woman alone to a place like this, looking for work?" Adelaide set down the cup and met his eyes. Something in his steady gaze made her want to tell the truth, instead of the careful half-truths she'd been telling. "My father died 6 months ago. We had a small farm in Missouri, but it turned out he'd borrowed money to keep it going, and when he passed, the bank took everything. I had an aunt in California, so I used what little I had left to book passage on a wagon train heading west. But when I got to Sacramento, I found out my aunt had died 2 years ago, and no one had thought to write and tell us. Gabriel's expression softened with sympathy. That's a hard string of luck. I've been working my way through the towns ever since, taking whatever jobs I could find, but work for women is scarce and what there is. She trailed off, not wanting to say aloud the kind of offers she'd received. I'm not afraid of hard work, Mr. Davis. I just need a chance. He was quiet for a long moment, his eyes never leaving her face. Adelaide felt exposed under that gaze but not threatened. There was something decent in this man, something solid and real that she hadn't encountered in a long time. Finally, Gabriel spoke. I do need help. The ranch is doing well enough that I could use someone to handle the house, the cooking, the garden. I've been doing it myself, but it takes time away from the horses, and that's where my real work is. I can offer you room and board and a fair wage besides. There's a separate bedroom in the ranch house, and I'll expect you to keep it locked at night if that makes you feel safer. I'm offering honest work for honest pay, nothing more and nothing less. Adelaide's eyes filled with unexpected tears. You'd hire me, just like that. You've got honest eyes and you're clearly willing to work. That's good enough for me. But I should warn you, the ranch is isolated. It's just me out there and the nearest neighbor is 3 miles away. If that makes you uncomfortable, I understand, but I wanted you to know before you decide. Adelaide thought about another night sleeping in an alley, another day of closed doors and hungry hours. She thought about the alternative offers she'd received, the leering faces and grasping hands. This man had kind eyes and a clean house and was offering her honest work. When can I start? She asked. Gabriel smiled, and it transformed his serious face into something warm and almost boyish. How about after you've had a meal and a good night's sleep? You look like you're running on fumes, Miss Owens. There's a boarding house down the street run by Mrs. Chen, a respectable widow who'll give you a clean room for the night. I'll cover the cost and come fetch you in the morning. We'll head out to the ranch then. I can start tonight, Adelaide protested. I don't need special treatment. It's not special treatment, it's common sense. I need a worker who's rested and fed, not one who's about to collapse. Besides, it'll give me time to ride out and make sure the spare room is properly set up. He stood and pulled some coins from his pocket, holding them out to her. For the boarding house and a meal. Consider it an advance on your wages. Adelaide took the coins, her throat tight with emotion. Thank you, Mr. Davis. You don't know what this means. Call me Gabriel, he said. And I think I have some idea. Life's been hard on you, Miss Owens. Time for that to change. That night, Adelaide lay in a real bed for the first time in weeks, clean sheets against her scrubbed skin, her belly full of Mrs. Chen's excellent stew. She stared at the ceiling and wondered if this was real, or if she'd wake up in another alley, this kindness just a dream born of desperation. But the morning came with sunlight through clean windows and the smell of breakfast cooking downstairs, and when she went to the front room, Gabriel was there waiting, hat in hand, looking freshly shaved and nervous. They rode out to the ranch in a wagon, and Adelaide watched the landscape change from the dusty chaos of Piotch to rolling hills dotted with sage and pinyon pine. The Egan Range rose in the distance, purple and majestic against the bright blue sky. The air was clean and sharp, scented with sage and the promise of autumn. The ranch house was larger than she'd expected, a sturdy structure of timber and stone with a wide porch and real glass windows. Behind it stood a barn, a corral with several horses and various outbuildings. Everything was well maintained, speaking of steady work and careful attention. Gabriel helped her down from the wagon, his hands respectful on her waist, releasing her the moment her feet touched ground. "Welcome to the Davis Ranch," he said. "It's not much, but it's home." "It's beautiful," Adelaide said honestly, looking at the neat buildings and the vast sky stretching overhead. He showed her through the house, pointing out the kitchen with its good stove and pump that brought water right inside, a luxury she hadn't expected. The main room had a stone fireplace, comfortable furniture, and those same shelves of books she'd noticed at his townhouse. There were 2 bedrooms, the larger clearly his and the smaller freshly aired and made up with clean linens. "This is yours," Gabriel said, showing her the small room with its narrow bed, dresser, and window that looked out over the hills. "There's a bolt on the inside of the door. I want you to feel safe here, Adelaide. I want you to feel like this is your home too." Something in the way he said her name, careful and respectful, made her heart do a strange little flutter. She pushed the feeling aside. This was her employer, nothing more. She couldn't afford to be foolish. The work began that day, and Adelaide threw herself into it with grateful energy. She cleaned the house from top to bottom, organized the kitchen, took stock of the larder, and made a list of supplies they'd need. She cooked dinner that night, a simple meal of beans and cornbread and fried salt pork, but she put care into it, and Gabriel's face when he tasted it made all her effort worthwhile. "I've been living on my own cooking for 3 years," he said after his second helping. "This is like remembering what food is supposed to taste like." Adelaide felt herself smile, a real smile that came from somewhere deep inside she'd thought had dried up. "Wait until I can get to a proper market. This is nothing." The days fell into a pattern. Gabriel worked with his horses, training them, breaking the wild ones, caring for them with a patience and gentleness that surprised her. He had a gift with the animals, a quiet way of moving and speaking that calmed even the most skittish Mustang. Adelaide managed the house, cooked their meals, tended the kitchen garden that was struggling from neglect, and slowly brought order to the domestic chaos of a bachelor's life. They talked during meals, careful conversations that slowly revealed their histories. Gabriel had grown up in Texas, learned horses from his father, and come to Nevada seeking his own fortune away from the shadow of family expectations. He'd built this ranch from nothing, starting with 2 horses and a dream, and now he had 24 animals and a reputation for training the best mounts in 3 counties. Adelaide told him more about Missouri, about her father who'd been a dreamer always chasing the next big idea, about a childhood that had been happy despite their poverty, about her mother who died when Adelaide was 12 and left her to manage a household before she was truly ready. "Sounds like you've been taking care of people your whole life," Gabriel observed one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the hills gold and crimson. "I suppose I have," Adelaide said. "I never thought about it that way. Who takes care of you?" The question caught her off guard. She looked at him, at his serious face gilded by the dying light, and couldn't find an answer. "That's going to change," Gabriel said quietly. "You're not alone anymore, Adelaide. You're home now. You can stay here always if you want." Not just as a worker, but as someone who belongs here. Her heart did that flutter again, stronger this time. "Gabriel, I don't understand." He turned to face her fully. "Maybe I'm speaking too soon. Maybe I should wait longer before saying this. But I'm not a man who knows how to be anything but honest, so I'm going to tell you the truth. From the moment you knocked on my door, I felt something. And every day since, watching you bring life to this house, hearing you laugh, seeing you smile, it's just gotten stronger. I'm falling in love with you, Adelaide. Maybe I already have fallen. And I know it's too soon and you probably think I'm crazy, but I had to tell you." Adelaide's breath caught in her throat. She looked at this good man, this kind man who'd opened his door when everyone else had closed theirs, and felt the truth bloom in her own chest like a flower that had been waiting for sun. "You're not crazy," she whispered, "because I feel it too. I've been trying not to, trying to tell myself it was just gratitude, but it's more than that. It's so much more." Gabriel reached for her hand, and she let him take it. His palm was rough from work, warm and strong, and holding it felt like coming home to a place she'd never been but had always been searching for. "Then stay," he said. "Not as my housekeeper, but as my partner, my companion. Court me proper, let me court you, and when the time is right, if you'll have me, stay as my wife. Stay always, Adelaide, make this your home forever." She felt tears on her cheeks, but they were good tears, healing tears. "Yes," she said. "Yes to all of it." He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it, gently. A gesture so sweet and old-fashioned it made her heart ache. They sat on the porch as the stars came out, hand in hand, and Adelaide thought about all the doors that had closed and the one that had opened. And she knew that sometimes the hardest roads led to the best destinations. The courting that followed was unlike anything Adelaide had experienced. The few boys who'd shown interest back in Missouri had been clumsy and awkward, more interested in what they could get than what they could give. Gabriel courted her with intention and care, with small gestures that showed he was paying attention to who she was. He brought her wildflowers from the hills, not the easiest blooms to pick but her favorites that she'd mentioned in passing. He ordered books from San Francisco that he thought she'd like based on conversations about what she enjoyed reading. He taught her to ride properly, not side saddle like a lady in town but astride like someone who needed to know the skill. And his hands were patient and steady as he showed her how to handle the reins, how to move with the horse instead of against it. Adelaide found herself falling deeper with each passing day. She loved watching him work with the horses, the way his whole body spoke a language the animals understood. She loved his laugh, rare but genuine, and the way his eyes crinkled at the corners. She loved that he read poetry in the evenings and wasn't ashamed of it, that he could discuss philosophy and horseflesh with equal passion. She courted him back in her own way, learning what made him happy. She discovered he had a weakness for apple pie and made one every week. She organized his books in a way that made sense, creating a small library corner he could enjoy. She sat with him in the evenings and listened to his dreams for the ranch, offering ideas that he actually considered, treating her as an equal partner rather than just a woman to be humored. 2 months after that first day, a cold snap came through, and Adelaide woke to find Gabriel sick with a fever. She spent 3 days nursing him, sponging his burning forehead with cool water, getting broth down his throat, sitting up through the long nights to make sure the fever didn't spike dangerously high. She was terrified in a way that made her realize just how much he'd come to mean to her. The thought of losing him, of this good man being taken away, was unbearable. When the fever finally broke on the 3rd night, Gabriel opened his eyes and found her sitting beside his bed, exhausted but relieved. He reached for her hand. "You stayed," he said, his voice rough. "Of course I stayed. Where else would I be? You could have gone to town, gotten Mrs. Chen or the doctor. Instead, you risked getting sick yourself." Adelaide squeezed his hand. "You opened your door for me when I had nowhere else to go. Did you think I'd leave you when you needed someone, Adelaide?" The way he said her name was like a prayer. "Marry me. I know it's soon. I know we said we'd court proper for a year like respectable people, but life's uncertain and I don't want to waste any more time. I love you. I want to spend every day I have left on this earth with you. Marry me." She didn't hesitate. "Yes. Yes, Gabriel, I'll marry you." He pulled her down to him despite his weakness and kissed her, and it was gentle and sweet and full of promise. Adelaide kissed him back, pouring all her hope and love and gratitude into it, this kiss that sealed their future. They were married 3 weeks later in Piach, in the small church that served the town's faithful. Mrs. Chen stood as Adelaide's witness, and Gabriel's nearest neighbor, a rancher named Tom Morrison, stood for him. Adelaide wore a simple dress of blue wool that Mrs. Chen had helped her make, with lace at the collar and cuffs. Gabriel wore his best suit, looking handsome and nervous and so full of love it made Adelaide's heart overflow. The preacher spoke the words that bound them together, and when Gabriel kissed her as his wife, Adelaide felt something shift in the universe, like a lock clicking into place or a door opening onto a room she was meant to inhabit. The wedding night was gentle and patient, Gabriel showing her with tender hands that this part of marriage could be about connection and care, not just duty. Adelaide had been nervous, the whispers of other women making her expect pain or awkwardness, but Gabriel made it beautiful. He took his time, made sure she was comfortable, asked if things were all right, and when they finally came together fully it felt natural and right, like two pieces of a puzzle finding their fit. Afterward, lying in his arms in the bed that was now theirs, Adelaide felt tears slip down her cheeks. "Did I hurt you?" Gabriel asked, immediately concerned. "No," she said quickly. "No, it's not that. I'm just happy. I didn't know it was possible to be this happy. A few months ago I was knocking on doors begging for work, and now I'm here, married to the best man I've ever known with a home and a future. It feels like a miracle." Gabriel held her closer. "You're the miracle, Adelaide. You brought life to this place. Before you came, this was just a house where I slept between work. Now it's a home. You did that." The winter that followed was cold but cozy. They spent long evenings by the fire, Gabriel reading aloud while Adelaide mended or knitted, learning the domestic art she'd never had time for when she was struggling to survive. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, learning each other's minds the way they'd learned each other's bodies. Gabriel taught her more about horses, and Adelaide discovered she had a knack for it. The animals responded to her gentle voice and patient hands, and soon she was helping him with the training in earnest, not just watching from the fence. They made a good team, Gabriel's strength and experience combined with Adelaide's intuition and care. In the spring, Adelaide realized her monthly courses had stopped. She waited another month to be sure, then told Gabriel one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "I'm with child," she said simply. Gabriel went very still. Then he turned to her with wonder written across his face. "Truly, truly, I think we'll have a baby by late autumn." He kissed her then, deep and thorough, and when they broke apart he rested his hand on her still flat belly with such tenderness it made her eyes sting. "A child, our child. Adelaide, you've made me the happiest man alive." The pregnancy was not easy. Adelaide was sick in the mornings for months, and the Nevada heat that summer was brutal. But Gabriel was attentive and patient, taking over more of the housework without complaint, making sure she rested, rubbing her aching back and swollen feet in the evenings. They argued only once, when Adelaide insisted on helping him with a particularly difficult horse despite her growing belly. Gabriel, usually so calm, raised his voice. "Adelaide, please, I can't lose you. I can't lose either of you. Let me do this alone." She understood his fear and her stubbornness had melted. "I'm sorry, I just don't want to be useless." He'd pulled her into his arms. "You're not useless. You're carrying our child. That's the most important work there is. Let me take care of you. Let me protect you both." She'd agreed, though it chafed to be less active. But Gabriel made sure she didn't feel sidelined. asking her opinion on ranch decisions, having her manage the accounts and correspondence, making her a partner in all ways that didn't risk her health. The baby came on a cold October night, a month earlier than expected. Gabriel rode for Mrs. Chen, who had experience as a midwife, but the labor moved fast. By the time they returned, Adelaide had delivered the baby herself, guided by instinct and determination. Gabriel burst into the bedroom to find his wife sitting up in the bed, exhausted but triumphant, holding a squalling bundle. "It's a boy," Adelaide said, tears streaming down her face. "We have a son, Gabriel." He approached slowly, like he was afraid to shatter the moment. Adelaide pulled back the blanket to reveal a red, wrinkled face with a shock of dark hair. The baby's eyes were squeezed shut as he howled his displeasure at being born into the cold world. "He's perfect," Gabriel breathed. "You're perfect. Adelaide, I love you so much." Mrs. Chen bustled in then, taking charge of the aftermath, checking Adelaide and the baby, clucking about women who delivered babies alone like it was an everyday occurrence. But Adelaide barely heard her. She was watching Gabriel hold their son for the first time, seeing this strong man reduced to tears by the tiny life in his arms. They named him Thomas Gabriel Davis, after Gabriel's father, and in honor of their neighbor Tom, who'd helped them so much. Tommy was a good baby, healthy and strong, with his father's green eyes and his mother's dark hair. He transformed the house again, filling it with new sounds and new purpose. Adelaide had worried she wouldn't know how to be a mother, but instinct and love proved to be good teachers. Gabriel was a devoted father, walking the floor with Tommy when he cried at night, changing nappies without complaint, singing old cowboy songs in a surprisingly good voice that soothed the baby to sleep. The ranch thrived. Word spread about Gabriel's skill with horses, and he had more business than he could handle. Adelaide suggested they hire help, a young man named Peter who lived in town and wanted to learn the trade. Gabriel took him on, and Peter proved quick to learn and devoted to the work. Having help meant Gabriel could spend more time with his family. He taught Tommy to ride almost before the boy could walk, setting him on a gentle mare and walking beside them, Adelaide's heart in her throat the whole time, but trusting her husband's skill and care. They had a daughter 3 years later, born in spring when the hills were green and covered with wildflowers. They named her Rose Catherine, and she was a happy baby with her father's calm temperament and her mother's curious nature. Tommy adored his little sister, bringing her flowers and rocks, and anything else he thought she might like. Adelaide sometimes paused in her daily work to look around and marvel at the life she'd built. The house that had been so neat and sparse when she first arrived was now full of life and color and noise. Toys on the floor, Tommy's drawings on the walls, Rose's cradle by the fire, the long table crowded with 4 chairs now instead of 2. She thought about that desperate woman who'd knocked on doors in Piotch 6 years ago, and she barely recognized her. That Adelaide had been surviving. This Adelaide was living. One evening, after the children were asleep, she and Gabriel sat on the porch as they often did. He took her hand, their fingers interlacing with the ease of long practice. "You ever regret it?" he asked. "Saying yes that first day, staying here instead of moving on to some city where there might have been more excitement, more opportunity?" Adelaide turned to look at him, this man who'd saved her life by opening his door, who'd loved her when she'd had nothing to give but herself. "I've never regretted it for a single moment. You gave me everything, Gabriel. You gave me a home, a family, a purpose. You gave me love." "How could I regret that? I always felt like I was the lucky one," Gabriel said. "You brought so much to my life. Before you, I was just existing, going through motions. You made everything mean something." "We saved each other," Adelaide said. "That's the truth of it. We were both incomplete, and we found completion together. They kissed as the stars came out, a married kiss, familiar but still touched with wonder. The years had added comfort to passion, companionship to love, but the feeling that had sparked that first day remained, steady and strong. The children grew. Tommy became tall like his father, with a gift for horses that surpassed even Gabriel's. Rose was bright and curious, always asking questions, always wanting to know how things worked and why things were the way they were. Gabriel said she'd be a teacher someday, or maybe a writer, someone who used that quick mind to make sense of the world. When Tommy was 12 and Rose was 9, Gabriel sat them down and told them the story of how he and Adelaide had met. He told them about their mother's courage, knocking on door after door, refusing to give up even when hope seemed lost. He told them how he'd opened his door and found the missing piece of his life standing on his porch. "Your mother is the bravest person I know," Gabriel said, Adelaide blushing beside him. "She faced a world that wasn't kind to women alone, and she didn't break. She kept going until she found where she belonged." "With us," Rose said, climbing into Adelaide's lap despite being almost too big for it. "With us," Adelaide agreed, holding her daughter close. Tommy looked at his parents with the seriousness he was developing as he approached young manhood. "I want to find someone like that someday. Someone brave and strong who I can build a life with." "You will," Gabriel assured him. "And you'll know her when you find her because she'll feel like home." The years continued their march. Tommy did find his someone, a rancher's daughter named Mary who could rope a steer and quote Shakespeare with equal facility. They married when Tommy was 21, and Adelaide cried happy tears watching her son pledge his life to this bright-eyed young woman who looked at him the way Adelaide still looked at Gabriel. Rose went to San Francisco to attend school, wanting to learn everything she could. She wrote long letters home, filled with details about her studies and the city and the big world beyond Nevada. Adelaide missed her terribly, but was proud of her daughter's courage to pursue knowledge. Gabriel's hair went gray at the temples, then silver all through. Adelaide found her own dark hair streaked with white. Their hands developed calluses and wrinkles, their bodies slowed with the years, but their love didn't diminish. If anything, it deepened, like a river carving through stone, constant and inexorable. Tommy and Mary built their own house on the Davis land, and soon there were grandchildren, 3 boys who ran wild through the ranch like their father had before them. Gabriel taught them about horses with the same patience he'd shown Tommy, and Adelaide told them stories and baked them pies and loved them with the fierce tenderness of a grandmother's heart. Rose came home eventually, bringing with her a young lawyer named David who she'd met in San Francisco. He was a good man, smart and kind, who treated Rose as an equal partner and made her laugh. They married in the little church in Piach, the same church where Adelaide and Gabriel had spoken their vows 30 years before. Rose and David settled in Sacramento where his practice was, but they visited often, bringing their own children in time, 2 girls and a boy who were as curious and bright as their mother. Adelaide and Gabriel grew old together on the ranch, surrounded by the life they'd built. They watched the sun rise and set on thousands of days, each one a gift. They faced hardships, droughts that tested the ranch, a winter that nearly broke them, Gabriel's brief illness that terrified Adelaide until he recovered. But they faced everything together, and together they endured. On their 40th wedding anniversary, Tommy and Mary hosted a celebration at the ranch. All the children and grandchildren came, the house bursting with noise and love and chaos. There was food and music and dancing, and Adelaide found herself swept into Gabriel's arms as someone played a fiddle. They danced slowly, carefully, their bodies knowing each other's rhythms after 40 years of partnership. Adelaide looked up at her husband, this man who'd opened his door and his heart, and saw the same love in his eyes that had been there on their wedding day. "I'd do it all again," Gabriel said softly, just for her. "Every moment, every choice, I'd make them all the same if it meant ending up here with you." "Stay always," Adelaide whispered, echoing the promise he'd made so long ago. "That's what you said, stay always. And you did. We both did." They kissed, and their children and grandchildren cheered, and Adelaide felt her heart overflow with joy so complete it was almost painful. The years continued, gentler now, quieter. Adelaide and Gabriel spent their days in simple contentment, tending a smaller garden, sitting on the porch, reading together, talking through the long Nevada evenings. Tommy ran the ranch now, doing a fine job of it, but Gabriel still consulted on difficult horses, his expertise valued even as his body slowed. Adelaide's hands became too stiff with age for fine sewing, but she could still cook, and the whole family still came for Sunday dinners when they could. The table crowded with 3 generations of love. They were 80 and 78 respectively when Gabriel had a stroke. It was mild, the doctor said, but it weakened his left side and slurred his speech. Adelaide nursed him through recovery with the same fierce devotion she'd shown during that first illness decades ago. She learned to understand his halting words, to anticipate his needs, to help him walk when his leg wouldn't quite obey. Gabriel recovered much of his function, but he was frailer after that, more fragile. He hated it. Adelaide could tell, hated being weak when he'd always been strong. But he accepted her care with grace, understanding that she needed to care for him as much as he needed the help. One spring evening, when the hills were green and the air smelled of sage and new growth, they sat on the porch as they'd done countless times before. Gabriel's hand in Adelaide's was thin now, the bones prominent, but his grip was still warm, still sure. "Adelaide," he said, his voice rough but clear, "I need to tell you something." She looked at him, seeing the seriousness in his face, and felt a flutter of fear. "What is it?" "I'm tired, my love. This old body is wearing out. I don't think I have much time left." "Don't say that," Adelaide whispered, even though part of her had known, had seen the way he was fading like an old photograph. "It's all right," Gabriel said. "I'm not afraid." "How can I be afraid when I've had such a blessed life? You gave me 45 years of happiness, Adelaide. You gave me children and grandchildren and a home filled with love. You gave me everything worth having. I'm grateful for every moment." Tears ran down Adelaide's cheeks. "I can't lose you. I don't know how to exist in a world without you. You're the strongest person I know. You'll endure. And I won't really be gone. I'll be here in this ranch we built, in our children, in every sunset over these hills. I'll be wherever you are, Adelaide. Always." He died 3 days later, peacefully in his sleep with Adelaide beside him. She held his hand as his breathing slowed and stopped, and she felt the moment his spirit left, like a door closing gently. The grief was enormous, a weight that threatened to crush her. But Adelaide was, as Gabriel had said, strong. She endured. Tommy and Mary moved into the main house to care for her, though she insisted she didn't need caring for. Rose came from California and stayed for a month, and the grandchildren visited constantly, surrounding her with love and distraction. Slowly, painfully, Adelaide learned to live in a world without Gabriel's physical presence. But he'd been right. He wasn't really gone. She felt him in the morning sun on the porch, in the sound of horses in the corral, in the pages of the books he'd loved. She felt him in every corner of the house they'd made together, in every memory that lived in these rooms. She lived 3 more years, long enough to see Tommy's boys grown into fine young men, long enough to hold Rose's first grandchild, long enough to know that the legacy she and Gabriel had built would continue. She died on a spring morning much like the one where Gabriel had passed, with the windows open and the smell of sage drifting in. Tommy was with her, holding her hand, and her last words were, "Tell him I'm coming. Tell your father I'm coming home." They buried her next to Gabriel on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a pine tree that had been growing there since, before they'd built the house. The whole family came, 3 generations of Davises, all of them born from that moment when a desperate woman knocked on a door and a lonely man opened it and said, "Stay." Tommy stood at his parents' graves after everyone else had gone back to the house. He looked at the simple headstones, Adelaide Owens Davis and Gabriel Davis, beloved wife and mother, beloved husband and father, and he thought about the story his father had told them when they were children. She had been begging for work at every door, and his father had opened his and said, "Stay always." And she had stayed, and in staying had created a legacy of love that would ripple through generations. Tommy picked 2 wildflowers from the hill, one for each grave, and placed them carefully. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for everything you built, for the love you showed us, for teaching us what a real partnership looks like. Rest well, both of you. You earned it." The wind sighed through the pine branches, and if it sounded like a contented breath, like 2 souls reunited and at peace, Tommy thought perhaps he could be forgiven for imagining it. Down at the ranch house, Mary called for him, and he could hear the grandchildren playing, their laughter carrying on the wind. Life continued, the way it always did, built on the foundation of those who came before. Tommy took one last look at the graves, then turned and walked down the hill toward home, toward the house his parents had filled with love, toward the family that continued their legacy. Behind him, the wind whispered through the pines, and 2 spirits danced together on a hill above the ranch, finally reunited, their love story complete but never ending, echoing through the generations they'd created and the land they'd tended and the hearts they'd touched. The ranch continued to thrive under Tommy's care, and his sons after him. Rose's children came west, and some of them stayed, drawn to the land and the legacy. The story of Adelaide and Gabriel was passed down through the family, a reminder that sometimes the greatest love stories begin with an act of kindness. A door opened when all others have closed, and the simple but profound words, "Stay always." And Adelaide had stayed, and Gabriel had loved her, and together they'd built something that lasted far beyond their years, a testament to the power of love and courage, and 2 souls finding their home in each other. Their story became legend in the family, told and retold, a romance for the ages that began with desperation and ended in grace. The house still stood decades later, carefully maintained by each generation, the porch where they'd sat still solid, the rooms where they'd loved and laughed and raised their children still echoing with memories. And on quiet evenings, when the wind was right and the sunset painted the hills gold and crimson, it was easy to imagine them still there, hand in hand, watching the day end and knowing they'd built something beautiful together, something that would endure long after they were gone.